Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Fallout History segment here today at the Bethesda booth at EB Expo. Now, it's very likely that none of you in the crowd today are actually going to know who I am, what it is I do, and the reasons for me being here. So, I'm going to give a brief introduction about myself and explain why exactly it is I'm here today. Online, I go by the name of Lone Vault Wanderer, and I run a YouTube channel that is based predominantly anyways on Fallout content. I've been a staunch lover of the Fallout series for many years now, and it was that passion of mine that initially pushed me to create my YouTube channel. And over the past couple of years in having my channel open, I've been given the opportunity on a number of occasions to work with many great people, and that has included other fantastic YouTubers, voice actors, developers, film creators, and of course Bethesda, and that's why I'm here today. Bethesda has asked me to come to EB Expo in Sydney and give a presentation of some sort. So with this exciting opportunity, I've decided to do something special that I hope is going to be a great addition towards Bethesda's fantastic build-up to Fallout 4, which by the way is set to release very soon on November 10, so please start thinking of ideas or excuses to get work off that week or month or however long you need to play the game. So with that aside, we need to do a couple of things. First of all, we need to of course thank our Lord and Savior God Howard for giving us this gift of Fallout 4. But in all seriousness, what we're going to be doing is getting prepared for the game essentially by taking a trip down memory lane and having a detailed look at all of the main games in the Fallout series to date, which include Fallout 1, 2, Tactics, 3, and last but not least, New Vegas. Now, of course, there is Fallout Shelter, and there is a game called Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, but we are going to be looking at the games I just mentioned before. And specifically what I'm going to be covering about these games is firstly, the development of each of these games, so you each know how those games actually came into existence. And secondly, we're going to be taking a look at the story and plot of each of these games, including what you as the main protagonist actually do and why. Now bear in mind that this is going to mean spoilers, but I think this is a great way to get prepped up for Fallout 4, given that it is just mere weeks away. And it's also going to give you a good sense of how the intellectual property has evolved over the years, which I think is an interesting story, to say the least. And note that as I talk, you're going to be seeing some general gameplay in the background that I collated for each game. They're not anything in particular, they're just really combat heavy, so just in case you find me a bit boring, there's at least some gameplay to keep you entertained in the meantime. And I need to stress that a lot of the information that I obtained for today's presentation was sourced from the Fallout Wiki, so I really need to thank all of the contributors to those pages. So, while I could just stand here and yell facts at you about the history of Fallout, I wanted to try and do something different. So, if we can run a bit of an experiment here today, can I ask you to put your hands up right now if you ever watch gaming content on YouTube just generally? Please put your hand up. Alright, now can you keep your hand up if at all you like to watch Fallout content on YouTube, and specifically Fallout YouTubers? Alright, now one last request, keep your hands up. Can you leave your hands up if you've heard of any one of the following YouTubers? ShoddyCast, Gopher, AlChestBreach, MrMattyPlays, Many a True Nerd, or Open World Games? Just leave your hand up. Alright, that's the exact response that I wanted. You can put your hands down now. And the reason why I asked those questions is because I've actually reached out to every one of these YouTubers to help me with today's presentation. And I've asked them to record some lines of dialogue for me, which you will be hearing throughout the course of this presentation. And specifically what they're going to be doing for me is mimicking or reenacting the iconic opening introductions that you see when you boot up every Fallout game. That's going to allow me to transition nicely into talking about the story and plot of each of those games. So I hope you guys are excited, and I hope that you are fans of these YouTubers because they're all fantastic people. So, let's go right back to the beginning with the original Fallout. Some people call it Fallout 1, but more simply, it is just Fallout. The original developers of Fallout were a little company known as Interplay Entertainment, and they were the creators of the 1988 post-apocalyptic RPG Wasteland. Now, initially, Interplay wanted to create a sequel to Wasteland, but they could not do so at the time, even after development of that game began, because they did not own the rights to the intellectual property. So Interplay had to embark on an adventure, if you will, to reinvent that game into something else. And they eventually dubbed that game Fallout, which was a top-down isometric role-playing single-player game. That is a bit of a mouthful. And the development team of Fallout included people such as director Fergus Urquhart, producers Tim Kaine and Brian Fargo, and designer Christopher Taylor, just to name a few people. Now, special mention really does need to go to Tim Kaine, who acted as the lead programmer for the game and created the in-game engine by himself in just 6 months. I think that's remarkable. And additionally, even in the midst of pressure to both cancel the game or also to turn it into a real-time game that had a multiplayer component, it was Kaine who convinced Interplay to allow him to finish Fallout, which he did so, starting in 1994 and initially working with Interplay employees in their spare time. Now, thankfully, Kaine was able to assemble a team of about 30 people after he finished his work on the engine for the game, and he was able to continue work on the game with that team for another 3 years. And finally, Fallout was released on September 30, 1997. Now, the initial intention was for Fallout to utilize the GURPS RPG system. Now, GURPS, if you don't know, stands for Generic Universal Role-Playing System, and it was a system that was created by Steve Jackson Games and first published in 1986. Now, because of this inclusion, the working titles of Fallout actually included GURPS Wasteland and Vault 13, a GURPS post-nuclear adventure. And the final title, Fallout, was suggested by Brian Fargo. Now, this name change was due to, in part, because the name sounded stupid, but in all seriousness, it was because a deal fell through with the creator of the GURPS system, as I said, Steve Jackson, who objected to the game's excessive violence and gore. So, let's praise God Howard that it was GURPS that was dropped and not actually the game's excessive violence, because what would Fallout be without the violence and the gore? And this, breaking of the deal caused Interplay to scramble, and they had to create a new system just 2 weeks out before the release of Fallout. And this is how the special attribute system came to be, because they needed to find a replacement for GURPS. And I think that is truly remarkable as well, because in 2015, today, over 18 years after the original Fallout, the special system is still alive and kicking in Fallout 4, a system that was created in just 2 weeks. So I hope I've given you a quick glimpse into the development of the original Fallout. So now it's time to look at the game's story, and to help me introduce this segment, here are the ShoddyCast's storyteller Jason. He has an absolutely epic voice, you're going to see what I mean. And Charles Battersby, the podcaster and writer of the ShoddyCast series. So let's take a look.
War. War never changes. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes. In the 21st century, war was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Only this time, the spoils of war were also its weapons: petroleum and uranium. For these resources, China would invade Alaska, the US would annex Canada, and the European Commonwealth would dissolve into quarreling, bickering nation-states, bent on controlling the last remaining resources on Earth. In 2077, the storm of World War had come again. In 2 brief hours, most of the planet was reduced to cinders. and from the ashes of nuclear devastation, a new civilization would struggle to arise. A few were able to reach the relative safety of the large underground vaults. Your family was part of that group that entered Vault 13. Imprisoned safely behind the large vault door, under a mountain of stone, a generation has lived without knowledge of the outside world. Life in the vault is about to change.
You're here. Good. We've got a problem. A big one. The controller chip for our water purification system has given up the ghost. Can't make another one, and the process is too complicated for a workaround system. Simply put, we're running out of drinking water. No water, no vault. This is crucial to our survival. And frankly, I think you're the only hope we have. You need to go find us another controller chip. We estimate we have 4 to 5 months before the vault runs out of water. We need that chip. We marked your map with the location of another vault. Not a bad place to start, I think. Look, just be safe. Okay?
So Fallout is set in an alternate reality which, in the 21st century, suffers a global petroleum shortage which spurs a worldwide conflict. This brought about the resource wars over the last non-renewable commodities, and this war begins in 2052 and culminates in 2077 when, on October 23rd, a global nuclear war occurs which kills billions over time. Now, this global catastrophe was predicted by many, including the US government, which commissioned the Forté Corporation as part of Project Safehouse to construct 122 vaults across the country, which were seemingly intended to protect their inhabitants from the ravages of war. Now, one such vault, Vault 13, is located in Southern California and is the focal point of the original Fallout. This is where the main protagonist, the Vault Dweller, begins his journey. It is 2161, 84 years after the war. You are informed that the water chip responsible for Vault 13's water recycling and pumping machinery has malfunctioned. If a replacement chip is not found within 150 days, the vault's water reserves will deplete. So with that ominous scenario, the Vault Overseer tasks you, the Vault Dweller, to find said replacement. So the Vault Dweller first travels to Vault 15 to do so, but unfortunately discovers the vault to be abandoned and in disrepair, with an unsalvageable water chip. The next major location is the Hub, which is a major trading center and a merchant city, and this is where the Dweller can buy Vault 13, if he chooses, another 100 days of survival by brokering a deal with water merchants to provide the vault with more supplies of water. Now, in the Hub, certain clues can be found which indicate that the Dweller must travel to Necropolis next, which is essentially a city of ghouls. Under the city, the player finds Vault 12 and recovers a water chip, but observes an unusual super mutant invasion. There are also reports coming from the Hub that super mutants are abducting humans from caravans, and on returning to Vault 13, the Overseer is of the belief that someone is actually creating these super mutants, and so charges the Dweller with another task of stopping this new threat. Now, there are two final tasks now that the Dweller must complete in any order. One, defeating the entity known as the Master, who is in fact the one responsible for the super mutant threat. And the second task is to destroy the super mutant military base. So if you decide to destroy the military base first, you head north where you discover that the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, is in fact the substance that is being used to mutate humans into super mutants. Destroying the base means destroying the super mutant threat and the creation of more super mutants, which the Dweller does so. And this is also in fact because super mutants are actually sterile. So if you decide to take on the Master first, you find your way to the once great Los Angeles, which is now dubbed the Boneyard, and encounter a strange group known as the Children of the Cathedral. The children worship the aforementioned Master, which is in fact a mutated brain that once went by the name of Richard Grey. The Master is controlling the children and using them to preach his message that the nuclear holocaust, or the Great War, is a chance to begin anew, by turning all remaining humans into super mutants in order to create unity and peace. Upon exploring the cathedral, you find a prototype vault from which the Master is commanding his army. So disguised as one of the children, the Dweller infiltrates the vault and destroys the Master. And with both tasks complete, the Vault Dweller can finally return to Vault 13. But as pleased as the Overseer is, and this is really the kicker of Fallout, he is also worried that inhabitants of the vault will want to emulate the Dweller's adventures and replicate your travels, and thus be encouraged to leave the vault eventually. So for the supposed greater good of Vault 13, the Overseer actually exiles the Dweller into the wasteland. Not a very good ending. So, on to Fallout 2, and following the success of Fallout 1, or the original Fallout, most of the development team at Interplay Entertainment actually dissolved, but about 1/3 of this team went on to form Black Isle Studios, which was a division of Interplay Entertainment. And Black Isle took the reins of the Fallout franchise and set to develop a direct sequel to the original Fallout, Fallout 2. Now, some notable people that were involved in the development of Fallout 1 that continued their involvement with the franchise and helped out with Fallout 2 included director Fergus Urquhart, programmer now writer Tim Kaine, and composer Mark Morgan, just to name a few people. Now, Interplay Entertainment, of course, continued to be involved in the game, but were now solely responsible for its publication. And Fallout 2 was released on September 30, 1998, exactly 1 year after the release of Fallout 1. So fans of the series actually didn't have to wait long to have their Fallout thirst quenched. Now that must feel really nice, because I know you, like me, have been waiting for Fallout 4, since Fallout New Vegas, probably 5 years, and then Fallout 3 was 2008, but I digress anyways. And importantly, Fallout 2 featured a much larger world than Fallout 1 and placed more of an emphasis on story, but continued to utilize the same engine, graphics, and also game mechanics as its predecessor. So essentially, Fallout 2 was still the top-down isometric single-player RPG that fans had come to expect. So to take a look at the opening introduction of Fallout 2, I've got Gopher, the YouTuber, to perform it for us. So let's take a look.
War. War never changes. The end of the world occurred pretty much as we had predicted. Too many humans, not enough space or resources to go round. The details are trivial and pointless. The reasons, as always, purely human ones. The Earth was nearly wiped clean of life. A great cleansing, an atomic spark struck by human hands, quickly raged out of control. Spears of nuclear fire rained from the skies. Continents were swallowed in flames and fell beneath the boiling oceans. Humanity was almost extinguished, their spirits becoming part of the background radiation that blanketed the Earth. A quiet darkness fell across the planet, lasting many years. Few survived the devastation. Some had been fortunate enough to reach safety, taking shelter in great underground vaults. When the Great Darkness passed, these vaults opened, and their inhabitants emerged to begin their lives again. One of the northern tribes claims they are descended from one such vault. They hold that their founder and ancestor, one known as the Vault Dweller, once saved the world from a great evil. According to their legend, this evil arose in the far south. It corrupted all it touched, twisting men inside, turning them into beasts. Only through the bravery of this Vault Dweller was the evil destroyed, but in doing so, he lost many of his friends and suffered greatly, sacrificing much of himself to save the world. When at last he returned to the home he had fought so hard to protect, he was cast out, exiled. In confronting that which they feared, he had become something else in their eyes, and no longer their champion. Forsaken by his people, he strode into the wasteland. He travelled far to the north, until he came to the Great Canyons. There, he founded a small village, Arroyo, where he lived out the rest of his years. And so for a generation since its founding, Arroyo has lived in peace, its canyons sheltering it from the outside world. It is home. Your home. But the scars left by the war have not yet healed, and the earth has not forgotten.
So set in 2241, 80 years after the events of Fallout 1, you play as a descendant of the Vault Dweller and live in the settlement that he founded in 2167, Arroyo. Your name is the Chosen One. But not all is well in Arroyo. The primitive settlement is suffering from a drought, so you are asked by the village elder to obtain a Garden of Eden creation kit, or GEC. A GEC is a terraforming device that is capable of revitalizing areas of post-nuclear wasteland, containing all of the seeds, fertilizer, and other equipment to enable the creation of a thriving community. In venturing out to obtain a GEC, you eventually arrive at Vault 13, the previous home of the Vault Dweller, your grandfather. This is one of the locations that a GEC can be found in the game, with the other located on an Enclave oil rig that you can encounter later. So the Chosen One discovers that Vault 13 is devoid of most of its past inhabitants, so he returns back home to Arroyo. But the settlement has actually been captured by the Enclave, an organization descending directly from members of the pre-war United States government, who continue to claim to be the legally sanctioned continuation of that government. All in all, they're widely known for their propaganda, and they're kind of assholes. So to save your village, you must embark on another quest to the aforementioned Enclave oil rig by traveling on an old oil tanker. Not only are the residents of Arroyo imprisoned here, but so too are those of Vault 13, who are also captured by the Enclave to be forcibly subjected to the testing of the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV. The Enclave had hatched a plan to modify the FEV to act as an airborne disease capable of attacking and killing any living creature that had mutated DNA, which would include most creatures and humans in the wasteland that had been exposed to radiation of the post-nuclear wastes. Given that the Enclave had generally protected themselves over the years from radiation and mutation, they were genetically pure and thus would not be harmed by the modified FEV strain. The inhabitants of Vault 13 made for perfect FEV test subjects, as the underlying experiment of the Vault was for it to be closed for 200 years after the Great War, meaning that the population were also quote-unquote pure strain and had not suffered from mutation. This is why the inhabitants of Arroyo were captured, because they had descended from those from within Vault 13, and thus there was also a chance, even though that they were exposed to the outside wasteland, that they too might be pure strain humans, suitable for the testing of the FEV. So now the Chosen One must act. He first frees the captured residents of Arroyo and Vault 13, and eventually destroys the Enclave's oil rig. In the process, you kill both the President of the United States and the leader of the Enclave, Dick Richardson, who was the one responsible for the aforementioned FEV plan. And you also kill the final boss and most powerful enemy in the game, Frank Horrigan, a genetically modified super mutant that is clad in power armor. So with the Enclave destroyed and Gek in hand, the Chosen One, along with all rescued persons from both Vault 13 and Arroyo, are free to create a thriving community. So the next game in the Fallout series is Fallout Tactics Brotherhood of Steel, or just Fallout Tactics for short. Now this game actually took the Fallout franchise in a slightly different direction, but it was still well received by critics nevertheless. And this game was developed by Australian developer Forté and published by 14 Degrees East. And while Tactics kept the top-down isometric elements of the previous Fallout games, the game mechanics differed slightly by being both a turn-based and also a real-time tactical RPG. This allowed for more free-flowing combat, which in my opinion personally made for a more exciting game. The game also received some general graphical improvements, and it was also the very first Fallout game to incorporate a multiplayer component, when it enabled you, as the player, to control a squad of characters and face other players in combat. And through certain means, you can actually still play the multiplayer component of Fallout Tactics today. And the game also marked the very first Fallout game that composer Einon Zur worked on Fallout, who actually continues to be in the franchise today, involved in the franchise today rather, by creating the musical scores for Fallout 3, New Vegas, and now Fallout 4. He has an awesome piano rendition of the main theme for Fallout 4, you really need to check that out. And with that out of the way, let's take a look at the opening introduction to Fallout Tactics. Now this one's a tad lengthy, so I've got the ShoddyCast's Austin Horrigan, AlChestBreach, and Open World Games to perform this one for us. Let's take a look.
War. War never changes. It was the inevitable result of the path humanity had chosen. Everyone who entered into the conflict expected victory. Everyone was optimistic. But the hostilities escalated, optimism faded, and society began to collapse. The great vaults were built to house the wealthy, the powerful, the influential, and those deemed necessary to their survival. Inside, resources and technology were stockpiled, a final defense against the coming Holocaust. With the past behind them and the present destroyed, they looked to the future. The sturdy Vault Zero was to be the nucleus of the Vault network, housing the greatest leaders, artists, and scientists. The inhabitants of Vault Zero were to reunite the vaults and lead the people to a new life, a new world. But after the bombs, the world would be a harsh one. To ensure the creation of a post-nuclear utopia, the Vault dwellers would need help. Machinery was constructed to tame a land hardened by the ravages of war, then tempered by nuclear winter. But plans were barely in place when the first missiles left the silos. During the destruction, communication between the vaults ceased. Entire vaults were lost. Those that survived were on their own.
Not all vaults succumbed to the machinations of war. On North America's west coast, one group of military vault dwellers emerged almost unscathed. They surveyed the wasteland and squared their shoulders for the task ahead. these dedicated survivors salvaged the technology from the vaults. Technology that was studied, replicated, and fiercely guarded. For they knew that while their power came from numbers, their future lay in scientific knowledge. In time, they formed the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood used their knowledge to drive back the atrocities of the wasteland, proclaiming themselves the technological saviors of mankind. They scoured the land in search of more technology, raiding mutant camps, bandit towns, and the broken remains of other vaults. But even they could not keep pace with the high tolls demanded by life in the wasteland. The Brotherhood found themselves at odds with their need for new blood versus their code of technological secrecy. The debate was lengthy. Finally, the Elders ruled against sharing the technology with outsiders, convinced that they would endure as they had before. Further discussion was discouraged, and the Elders ordered the minority on a mission across the wastes.
Super mutants, the foot soldiers of a conquered army, had been forced into retreat across the mountainous barriers to the east. The Brotherhood constructed airships and dispatched the minority to track down and assist the extent of the remaining super mutant threats. But disaster struck while crossing the Great Mountains. A great storm broke the main airship and flung it far from its course. The mighty ship was badly damaged. The smaller sections were torn from the main craft, never to be seen again. Many of the expedition's leaders were lost to the winds. The fraction of the crew that still survived struggled to keep their ship aloft before finally crashing on the outskirts of a once thriving metropolis. A city once called Chicago. Broken, scattered, and scarred, they took stock of the situation and once again squared their soldiers to the task ahead. The Brotherhood had much to offer to the surrounding villages. They traded advanced medicines in exchange for food and labor. They traded protection from bandits in exchange for new recruits. In time, their ranks began to swell. Separated by distance and ideology from the main Brotherhood forces, the minority was free to forge a new Brotherhood of Steel, one that reflected the ideals they had strived for all along. However, one's future in the wasteland is never certain, for an old power has awakened, also bent on making this land its own. Life in the Brotherhood is about to change.
So Fallout Tactics starts with you filling the shoes of an initiate in the Brotherhood of Steel. You were tasked with leading a group of soldiers to kill raiders, and after doing so, you are accepted as a fully fledged member of the Brotherhood of Steel. You are then briefed on the true intentions of the Brotherhood, that being to campaign west to the Rocky Mountains in search of Vault Zero, which used to be the command center of the pre-war network. But you must face the remnants of the super mutant army that the Brotherhood squad were initially tasked with destroying. Outside of St. Louis, the Brotherhood attempted to form an assault against the super mutants, but found themselves to be overwhelmed. And it was there that General Barnaky, the head of the Brotherhood, is captured by Tokamata, the High Inquisitor of the mutant army, which is led by a figure going by the name of Gamorin. The Brotherhood discover the base of the super mutant army, and upon invading it, Tokamata is found, but reveals that Barnaky was taken by an unknown enemy that not even the super mutants could withstand. In another room, you discover Paladin Latham, a former Brotherhood member who was actually part of the crashed air convoy, and had subsequently assumed the identity of the super mutant leader, Gamorin, after fighting him in hand-to-hand combat. And then you discover that it was in fact Latham that led the mutant army against the Brotherhood, and this was due to him becoming delusional after suffering a wound and subsequently an infection in the fight against the original Gamorin. And then you kill Latham. Soon after, the aforementioned unknown enemy is revealed to be a robot army that is traveling across the American Midwest, and the Brotherhood and the robot army then clash in Kansas. It is then discovered that the aforementioned Vault Zero is in fact the origination of the robot army, who are acting under the direction of a fusion of computers and human brains known as the Calculator. In the push towards Vault Zero, the Brotherhood destroys a manufacturing plant of the robot army and finds the body of General Barnaky, which, unfortunately, is missing his brain. A plan is then concocted by the Brotherhood to travel to Cheyenne Mountain Complex, the location of Vault Zero, and destroy the robot army using a nuclear bomb. The assault begins and the Brotherhood successfully activate their nuclear warhead, which paves a path into the bunker. There, the Brotherhood encounter the remaining forces of the robot army, headed by General Barnaky, who is now a cyborg. Barnaky will either attack the Brotherhood squad, or, on reminding the General of his past promise to make the world safe for his wife, he can be prevented from attacking. Either way, the Brotherhood find their way to the calculator and destroy the brains that are keeping him alive. But the calculator offers a last request to the squad, and this is where a number of choices arise in Fallout tactics. You can either allow the calculator to self-destruct, sacrifice a member of the squad so that they can be used as a brain donor to repair the calculator, or allow General Barnaky to become the donor. If the calculator self-destructs, the Brotherhood can claim Vault Zero for themselves, but will lose the valuable data banks of the calculator. If the calculator's brain is repaired with the squad members, the Vault's resources are widely available, which enable the Brotherhood to restore the Midwest to glory. However, if the brain donor character committed unethical acts throughout the game, the new calculator outlaws discrimination against mutated species and murders elders of the Brotherhood to implement a similar regime in California. But alternatively, if during the course of the game the player acted with distinction, discrimination is outlawed but no harmful acts are committed. Finally, if Barnaky becomes the donor, the new calculator will start a campaign of genocide against all unpure humans, which eventually drives them into extinction. Now we reach one of the most popular Fallout games, and arguably, in my opinion anyways, one of the most beloved video games of all time, Fallout 3. But first, let's cover the original Fallout 3. Black Isle Studios had actually already begun work on developing a new Fallout game, which they codenamed Van Buren. However, Interplay Entertainment went bankrupt and closed its doors before the game could actually be finished. And long story short, this resulted in good old Bethesda Softworks purchasing the license to develop Fallout 3 for a cool $1 million. Roughly anyways. And if anyone here has taken a look at the making of Fallout 3 video that came packaged with the special edition, you will know that Bethesda Game Studios had long wanted to work on a video game other than the Elder Scrolls franchise. And at the top of their list was of course Fallout. So 3 years later, Bethesda bought the rights to the entirety of the Fallout intellectual property outright. And Bethesda Softworks then enlisted its internal dev studio, Bethesda Game Studios, to begin development of Fallout 3 in July of 2004, with none other than Todd Howard as director and lead producer. Development of Fallout 3 truly ramped up after major work on the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion had ceased. The final game was first released on October 28, 2008, being published, of course, by Bethesda Softworks. Now, as we all know, Bethesda completely re-envisioned the Fallout series with Fallout 3. While it continued to be based on the Fallout universe and the rich lore that the series was known for up until that point, BGS developed Fallout 3 as a first/third-person action RPG as opposed to a top-down isometric game. And in doing so, the game utilized the Gamebryo engine, and in my opinion, it was this design choice that was truly the catalyst that spurred Fallout to become the worldwide phenomenon that it is today. So to reenact the iconic introduction of Fallout 3, I've enlisted my good friend MrMattyPlays to do it for us. So let's check it out.
War. War never changes. Since the dawn of humankind, when our ancestors first discovered the killing power of rock and bone, blood has been spilled in the name of everything, from God to justice to simple psychotic rage. In the year 2077, after millennia of armed conflict, the destructive nature of man could sustain itself no longer. The world was plunged into an abyss of nuclear fire and radiation. But it was not, as some had predicted, the end of the world. Instead, the apocalypse was simply the prologue to another bloody chapter of human history. For man had succeeded in destroying the world. But war never changes. In the early days, thousands were spared the horrors of the Holocaust by taking refuge in enormous underground shelters known as vaults. But when they emerged, they had only the hell of the wastes to greet them. All except those in Vault 101. For on that fateful day, when fire rained from the sky, the giant steel door of Vault 101 slid closed and never reopened. It was here you were born. It is here you will die. Because in Vault 101, no one ever enters, and no one ever leaves.
So Fallout 3 begins with you witnessing your own birth, blood and all, and catching the first glimpse of your father, James, a doctor and a scientist. Unfortunately, there are complications, and your mother, Catherine, sadly passes away. You then witness your growth from child to adult in Vault 101, but are awoken one night by your friend Amata, who reveals that your father has left the vault, causing the Overseer to go crazy and send his security after you. In a frenzy, you manage to escape and travel across the ruins of Washington DC, the capital wasteland, to find your father. First up, you head to the town of Megaton and ask people about your father's whereabouts. After some interactions with good old Cullen Moriarty, you find out that you must travel to Galaxy News Radio, where you encounter the DJ 3 Dog. Successfully passing a speech check or repairing GNR's damaged radio relay will result in 3 Dog mentioning Project Purity and explaining how your father went off to visit a Dr. Lee in Rivet City. Dr. Lee provides more information about Project Purity. Turns out it was a plan concocted by both your parents to utilize a purifier built in the Jefferson Memorial to cleanse the water in the tidal basin and thereafter the entire Potomac River. But the death of Catherine, your mother, had put a halt to this ambitious plan. So you investigate the memorial and track your father to Vault 112, housed with a virtual reality simulator and a cryogenic system. The Vault's overseer and creator of the GEC, Dr. Stanislas Braun, has your father trapped in one of these VR simulated utopias, Tranquility Lane. You save your father and return back to Rivet City, where James reveals his intentions for seeking out Braun and Vault 112 to uncover information on the GEC, the final piece of the puzzle for activating Project Purity. So you all embark back to the Jefferson Memorial, but are ambushed by the Enclave soon after arrival. To stop the Enclave's Colonel Autumn from actually taking control, your father, in a heroic last-ditch effort, floods the main control room with radiation, killing himself in the process. So with Dr. Lee and the remaining team, you flee to the Citadel, once the Pentagon, but now the main base of control for the Brotherhood of Steel. You then seek out the GEC that your father had mentioned, located in Vault 87, which was a testing ground for the FEV. But unfortunately, after obtaining the GEC, you are taken captive by the Enclave, and soon awake at their base at Raven Rock. The leader of the Enclave, President John Henry Eden, soon sends you free and requests a personal audience. But en route, Colonel Autumn commands the Enclave members to kill you. Combat ensues, but eventually you find your way to Eden's office. But there you discover that Eden is in fact a sentient Zax series supercomputer who took control of the Enclave after their defeat in Fallout 2, And if you remember Dick Richardson's plan to utilize the FEV to kill any living creature that contained even a small amount of mutation, well, Eden actually wanted to do something very similar by injecting a modified strain of the FEV into the soon-to-be fresh water to be generated from the Jefferson Memorial. The Wanderer, handed with the virus, can then simply leave or convince Eden to self-destruct the base. Either way, you return to the Citadel to rendezvous with the Brotherhood of Steel. The plan is to now recapture the Jefferson Memorial and drive out the Enclave. To do so, the Brotherhood utilize their secret weapon, Liberty Prime, a giant weaponized robot. Eventually, you confront Colonel Autumn, and by either killing him or persuading him to leave, you are free to activate Project Purity. To do so, however, the code 216 must be manually inputted into the command room, which is now flooded with a deadly level of radiation. Either you doing this yourself or having Brotherhood member Sarah Lyons to do so, Project Purity is successfully activated, and fresh water is supplied to the Capital Wasteland. If the FEV virus is injected beforehand, however, the water will now kill any living creature with even a small amount of mutation, which will include, unfortunately, the majority of humans. Now to the final game in this presentation, and a personal favourite of many fans, Fallout New Vegas. After the huge success of Fallout 3, a follow-up Fallout game was inevitable. But with BGS jumping straight back to the Elder Scrolls franchise to develop Skyrim, the Fallout series would be sitting in limbo unless another developer was temporarily handed the reins. So Bethesda enlisted Obsidian Entertainment to create the next Fallout game, dubbed Fallout New Vegas. This decision was significant because Obsidian was actually founded by some of those original members of Interplay Entertainment and Black Isle Studios that worked on the original Fallout games, which included Fergus Urquhart and Chris Avallone. Because of these direct ties to the original games, it is no surprise that Obsidian decided to continue the West Coast lore of the Fallout franchise as opposed to Fallout 3's East Coast narrative. Bethesda had initially rejected Obsidian's idea to set the game between the events of Fallout 2 and Fallout 3, but they approved the setting of New Vegas instead, or Las Vegas. The game does, however, take a lot of inspiration from the cancelled Fallout 3 game that I mentioned earlier, Van Buren. Developer Josh Sawyer of Obsidian was in fact involved with Van Buren and saw out its cancellation, so it's actually good to know that he was able to pick up the ball again with Fallout New Vegas. And Fallout New Vegas was first announced in 2009 and had a very short development cycle of just 18 months. And given this, New Vegas utilized the same Gamebryo engine as Fallout 3, as well as many of the same assets and source code. But Obsidian did add some innovations, like the ability to aim down sights and a hardcore mode. Finally, on October 19, 2010, Fallout New Vegas was released to the public. And to help us examine the story and plot of that game, I have the YouTuber and New Vegas lover, Many a True Nerd, to perform the game's opening introduction. And you may also hear a very, very bad cameo from myself. So let's take a look.
War. War never changes. When atomic fire consumed the Earth, those who survived did so in great underground vaults. When they opened, their inhabitants set out across the ruins of the old world to build new societies, establish new villages, forming tribes. As decades passed, what had been the American Southwest united beneath the flag of the new California Republic, dedicated to old world values of democracy and the rule of law. As the Republic grew, so did its needs. scouts spread east, seeking territory and wealth in the dry and merciless expanse of the Mojave Desert. They returned with tales of a city untouched by the warheads that had scorched the rest of the world, and a great wall spanning the Colorado River. The NCR mobilized its army and sent it east to occupy the Hoover Dam and restore it to working condition. But across the Colorado, another society had arisen under a different flag. A vast army of slaves, forged in the conquest of 86 tribes, Caesar's Legion. 4 years have passed since the Republic held the dam, just barely, against the Legion's onslaught. The Legion did not retreat. Across the river, they gathered strength. Campfires burned, training drums beat. Through it all, the New Vegas Strip has stayed open for business, under the control of its mysterious overseer, Mr. House, and his army of rehabilitated tribals and police robots. You are a courier, hired by the Mojave Express to deliver a package to the New Vegas Strip. What seemed like a simple delivery job has taken a turn for the worse.
You got what you were after, so pay up.
You're crying in the rain, Pally.
Huh, guess who's waking up over here?
Time to cash out.
Will you get it over with?
Maybe Khans kill people without looking them in the face. But I ain't a fink. Dig? You've made your last delivery, kid. Sorry you got twisted up in this scene. From where you're kneeling, it must seem like an 18-carat run of bad luck. Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
So Fallout New Vegas begins with you waking up in the quaint town of Goodsprings after having your life saved by Doc Hoff. You are a courier working for the Mojave Express, but were ambushed on your way to deliver the mysterious platinum chip. To rectify this situation, you begin a journey across the Mojave to confront the man who left you for dead, Benny. Now, New Vegas is a game that involves so much player choice as to the factions or people you do or do not decide to support and build ties with. Now, the main factions and persons that are crucial to the game's main plot include the following: the New California Republic, or NCR, which is a large democratic federation and expansionist government which are striving to return order, democracy, and peace to the wasteland. Secondly, Caesar's or Caesar's Legion, an autocratic totalitarian slavist society that is led by its founder and now leader, Caesar, which is based on the Roman Empire and found its growth largely by conquering pre-established tribes. And finally, there is Mr. House, the charismatic controller of the New Vegas Strip, the one bright spark of the wasteland that is filled with casinos, prostitution, gambling, and a lot of drinking, which is protected by an army of Securitron robots. So after the courier finds Benny and reclaims the platinum chip, the conflict between the aforementioned factions is about to reach a melting point. Each group will actively seek out your services to assist in the battle of control over New Vegas. The key to doing so is Hoover Dam, a fully operational dam that is supplying the Southwest with clean, non-irradiated water and power. Control of the dam effectively means control of New Vegas. And there was once a great battle over the dam between NCR and Caesar's Legion, with the former faction being victorious. But Caesar's Legion, while it retreated in defeat, has bided its time since then, all in preparation for yet another assault to try and reclaim the dam for their own. But what's the significance of the platinum chip? Well, you soon discover that the chip was in fact ordered before the Great War by Mr. House, a human that has been kept alive via a life support chamber and communicates through a computer network. The chip is so significant because it is actually a data storage device that can be utilized by Mr. House to upgrade his Securitron army and vastly improve their effectiveness and abilities in combat. And this is why Benny wanted the chip, to take control over the Securitrons and become the new leader of New Vegas, thanks to the help of a reprogrammed Securitron going by the name of the Yes Man. So this is where the true choice of New Vegas comes to pass. Specifically, there are 4 major directions that you can decide to pursue. Fight for the NCR, fight for Caesar's Legion, go undercover and assist Mr. House, or instead continue where Benny left off, obtain the assistance of the Yes Man, and claim New Vegas for yourself. Once you've made up your mind and prepared, Caesar's Legion will begin its assault on Hoover Dam, led by its fearsome legate Linnaeus. The NCR fights back under the direction of General Lee Oliver. The decision you made earlier is going to determine the result of the final battle, and will subsequently have incredibly large consequences for the outlook of the Mojave. If you assist either Caesar's Legion or the NCR, that specific faction will win the battle and claim Hoover Dam for themselves, thereby taking control of the Mojave. If you instead decide to assist Mr. House, you end up connecting the dam's network to that of Mr. House so that he takes control of the Hoover Dam himself. If, however, you wanted New Vegas all to yourself, you would still connect the dam's network to that of Mr. House's, but then the Yes Man will then take control of it for you. You then drive out both the Legion and NCR from the Hoover Dam, and in the process, secure the independence of New Vegas and the Mojave. So we have now reached the end of the Fallout history segment here today at EB Expo. I hope you have learned something about the Fallout series. It was an absolute blast to prepare this presentation for you and to present here today. If you wanted to ask any questions, I'll be sticking around for a while longer, so please feel free to come up and approach me. And until I see you next time, guys and girls, please, stay safe and enjoy the rest of the expo.